Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I focus on everything luxury beauty and fashion. If you're interested in the latest fashion beauty trends as well as luxury vlogs, then you are in the right place. Today we're going to talk about the Couture eyeshadow palettes from Dior. I can't believe that we're already talking about the holiday collections now, given that it's still early October. But I can't wait to talk about the beautiful packaging this year, which was inspired by the circus of the dreams. I'm going to do a detailed comparison between this year's release versus last year's. I'm going to talk about the packaging as well as the price increase. And as many of you know, that the price increased by about 2 times over the last 5 years on those Couture eyeshadow palettes. So I will provide a very detailed breakdown in terms of this year's price increase as well as how much you're going to save by purchasing the big face palette as opposed to the individual components that are included. At the end of this video, I'm also going to do a makeup demo so that you can understand the performance of those products as well as the swatches compared to previous year's collections. So if that's something that you're interested in, please make sure that you continue watching. For those of you that are new to this channel, hello and welcome. On this channel, we do a lot of luxury vlogs as well as beauty reviews like this video. So if that's something that you're interested in, I would appreciate it if you can like this video and subscribe to my channel so that you can join the fam. I really appreciate your support in terms of helping me to create this community full of luxury beauty lovers. For those of you that are familiar with this channel, you know that I typically would have a very comprehensive coverage on all the holiday releases from major brands, and I'm going to do another video on the rest of the Dior Holiday collection, which includes 2 limited edition Dior Show eyeshadow palettes, and I'm also going to talk about the sparkly new lipstick topper, which is really pretty, as well as the new shade for the liquid highlighter. I'm also going to talk about this year's powder highlighter that has the same packaging design compared to the eyeshadow palette over here. I also did a very detailed review on this year's holiday gift sets, which I'm going to link down below in case you guys are interested. I have to say that I was very pleasantly surprised by the free pouch that they introduced this year, which is very well made with a adjustable top handle, which makes it the perfect evening bag that you can take to your holiday parties this year. So please make sure that you check out the link down below if that's something that you're interested in. Without any further ado, cheers, let's get the party started. Let's first talk about this year's packaging, which is following the theme of Circus of the Dreams. I really like how this year's packaging is slightly more unique compared to the last 2 years. And if you guys watched my video on this year's holiday gift set, I had a pretty detailed comparison between this year's paper packaging versus the last 2 years. So I'll make sure to link that video down below if you would like to find out more about it. At the back of this package, it shows the product that's inside. So basically a 5 eyeshadow pen, which is the one that I picked up. When you open up the box, this is what's inside, which has a very beautiful quilted design with Dior stars that's like embedded all over the cover. Every year, if I like the packaging of the holiday design, I would always collect a small eyeshadow palette because as many of you know that you can take out this eyeshadow inside pretty easily and convert this eyeshadow palette into a little wallet. And I mean, this is one of the best things that I think Dior launches every year during the holiday season because of this. I'm going to compare this year's design versus last year's so that you can see the difference. So in the last 2 years, Dior has been following this white and gold color theme in their holiday packaging design, but the actual theme of the designs are quite different in nature, and the opening mechanism of the 2 eyeshadow palettes are also different. So last year's palette, and in the last few years actually, Dior has been using this kind of I don't know how to describe this clip type of design where you kind of, like flip open the eyeshadow palette. Whereas this year they changed the opening mechanism to have a more secure design, in my opinion. So you have to kind of actually pull pretty hard to open this palette, and when you close the palette you will hear a clicking sound. So I do think this design is more secure compared to the previous years. I also really like the star detail this year by the opening, where there's a Dior star that looks the same as the charm that's in the holiday gift bags. So I think that's really cute. In fact, because as mentioned, star is one of the obsessions of Christian Dior, the founder, this is actually a recurring element in many holiday designs in the last few years. I can't remember which year was this one. I'll have to look it up for you guys, but as you can see, a few years ago they also had a star design for one of the holiday packagings. But I do think this year's packaging is quite unique, which is really, I think it's more feminine compared to some of the previous year's designs. Now let's talk about the price points, which is probably what most people are interested in. So this year they had a pretty big increase in price in Canada. The big palette now retails for 210 Canadian dollars, which is about 20% increase compared to last year's price. The US in comparison didn't see as much of a price increase, probably because the US dollar has been quite stable in the last year. It increased by less than 5%, so now it retails for 152 US dollars compared to last year's price, which is 147 US dollars. However, if you compare to the price from 5 years ago, which is 2020, the price was only 89 US dollars. So we're talking about almost doubling the price as well in the last 5 years. But what I will say is that I do think that Dior improved the kind of the layout of the palette over the years. I believe this is the one from 5 years ago, and you can see that they don't really have like a lot of highlighter choices in this palette, and the eyeshadows are quite close in terms of selection compared to the more recent years, where I think they improved their selections in terms of the color choices as well as the variety of formulas. So, and this palette is from last year's collection, which I did a very detailed review on. I'm going to link it down below in case you're interested. And this small eyeshadow palette now retails for 92 US dollars, which is about 5% increase compared to last year's price, which is 87 US dollars. Even though the price increase is not as significant from the previous year, the price increased by about 2 times over the last 5 years. In the Canadian market, the price increase is a lot more significant, probably because the Canadian dollar has been weakening in the last few years. So the Canadian price increased by about 15% to 120 Canadian dollars compared to last year's price, which was 105 Canadian dollars. So that's a pretty big jump. And I'm going to talk about whether I think the price increase is justified and whether I think this is still a good buy. Now, if you want to compare the price of those couture palettes versus the permanent collection, so again, this small palette retails for 92 US dollars compared to the regular Dior Show 5-pen eyeshadow palette, which retails for 75 US dollars. And as many of you know, that there are also 2 limited edition colors coming out. I will do a full review on those 2 palettes as well, so please make sure that you follow my channel so that you don't miss out. Comparing this palette to the permanent collection Dior Show 5-pen eyeshadow palettes, the price difference is about 25%. So it's 92 US dollars versus 75 for the permanent collection, and 120 Canadian dollars versus 96 Canadian dollars for the permanent collection. So you're paying slightly more for the special packaging, which I think is worth it because, as mentioned, you can take the eyeshadow out of the pen and turn your eyeshadow palette into a beautiful wallet. I don't really bring this wallet on the go with me because it is a little bit bulky, but I do use it to store my extra credit cards, which I think is a beautiful addition to my closet. So I highly recommend it. Even if you are not interested in the eyeshadow palettes, I do think that there are some additional use of this palette. Now, in terms of the bigger palette, you are actually going to save some money, which is really, really nice. So I had a detailed breakdown for you guys in terms of how much each of the component of the face palette cost, and I got all the numbers from the permanent collection. So starting with the middle of the palette, which is very similar to a permanent collection 5-pen Dior Show eyeshadow palette that retails for 72 US dollars or 95 Canadian dollars. And there are 2 blushes that retails for 49 US dollars or 62 Canadian dollars. And on the other side of the palette, there are 2 highlighters that retail for 52 US dollars or 70 Canadian dollars. And then in the bottom row, there are 4 lipsticks, which retails for about 40 US dollars or 52 Canadian dollars. And these numbers are coming from the lipstick refill as opposed to the full-size Rouge Dior lipsticks, because I did take into account that, you're not getting a bullet lipstick. You're not paying for the packaging. You're just getting the product. So I would say this is a pretty conservative calculation. And if you look at the final result, you will be saving about 60 US dollars compared to purchasing everything individually from the permanent collection. And for Canadian customers, you are saving about 70 Canadian dollars, which is quite similar to the savings that you would have got from last year's collection. So even though the whole palette is more expensive, the individual components are also more expensive this year. And if you do want to save money, I think this face palette is a very good way to go. Now let's talk about the embossing on the actual palette. So as mentioned, this year the design has a lot of star element, and this is last year's small eyeshadow pen. I would say last year's embossing is not as detailed compared to this year's, although I have to say I used this palette quite a bit, as you can see, and I am losing most of the embossing. I will show you the big palette, which is a lot newer than the smaller one. So this palette, as you can see, really like the embossing, but I think it's less sophisticated compared to this year's design. But anyways, that's not something that I care about because I do use my eyeshadows and the embossings will be gone after a few uses. So that's not something that I'm concerned about. I do want to show it to you guys in case that's something you are concerned about. And similar to last year's collection, this eyeshadow palette is made in France, as stated at the back. And there are 5 colors. Each one of them weigh about 2 grams. I'm surprised that, if you look at the back of the eyeshadow, the weight is actually slightly different for each of the colors. Maybe because the embossing is slightly different, that's causing the weight to be a little bit different. But generally, each color is about 2 grams or 0.06 ounce. So that's the size of the product. Now, in terms of the actual shades that are included in this year's palette, I think it's slightly more cool tone and neutral compared to last year's collection. So as you can see, there are a lot of mauvey pink, light brown, and this pink color in the middle is very beautiful. Whereas last year's colors, I think, is a lot more warm. As you can see over here, even though there's a purple in there, somehow I think the red and this copper color, even the gold, is leaning quite warm. So that's one noticeable difference. I also want to note that traditionally Dior like to use very satin, silky formula for this palette, which is not my personal favorite because I do have hooded eyes that kind of tend to smudge with this type of formula. Whereas this year they did introduce some matte colors, such as this brown color over here, which is really nice because you can use this color as a crease color to add some depth, and matte colors are the best for that purpose. And you have this satin color in the middle, which can be an inner corner highlight or even an eyebrow highlight. And then this light brown color is quite pretty too, which is nice if you want to blend out this deeper brown color. And this color is quite pretty as well. It's like more like a mauvey pink color, which is really pretty. The gold color this year, I think, is a little bit different than the previous years, where it is really deep and warm, whereas most of the palettes that Dior released in the previous holidays, you tend to have this champagne gold color that's more common, I would say. So this is one color that I'm a little bit surprised about, but I think overall the color story is quite elegant and easy to wear. I don't see a lot of similar colors between the last 2 years, given that, like I mentioned, the formulas are a little bit different. But I did notice a few colors that are quite similar compared to last year's face palette. And I did do some comparisons for you guys. For example, this deep brown color is quite similar to the deep brown color from last year's face palette, although last year's color is leaning more warm, whereas this year's brown is leaning more cool toned. And I also noticed that this mauvey pink color is slightly similar to last year's burgundy shade, and again, last year's color is leaning slightly more warm and deeper. And I also noticed that this pink color in the middle, the highlighter shade, is similar to last year's highlighter shade over here. And I did some swatches for you guys as well. As you can see, they are quite similar. One thing that I noticed is that I think Dior makes very beautiful highlighters, but I'm not sure why the highlighters that they include in the big face palette tends to be quite patchy, which is also why I didn't pick up this year's face palette. I was actually really happy when they introduced the baby pink color and the almost white highlighter color in the big pen, but when I went to the store to do the swatches, I was a little bit disappointed by the pigmentation of those two colors. They are quite sheer and a little bit glittery and patchy, which is why I didn't pick up that palette. But I will say that I do really like the lipstick collections that they included in the big palette this year, especially the mauvey pink color. I think that's really, really pretty, and I may pick up the refill from the permanent collection, given I think that's a really nice neutral fall color, which I think I will get a lot of use out of. Now let's talk about the demo that I did today. When I look at this palette, I feel like it's difficult to apply all 5 colors on the lid and still be able to show the difference. So what I did is that on one eye, I used this deep brown color as a crease color, and I used this lighter brown color to kind of blend out the crease color. And then I used this gold color as a center of the lid highlight. That's look number 1. And I did another look on the other side of my face where I used this mauvey pink color as the crease color, and then I used this pink color as the center of the lid highlight. I think both looks are very sophisticated and pretty. And I do like the cool toned color scheme that they introduced this year, because in the previous years, as mentioned, the color story tends to be more warm leaning. So I do think this is an interesting change, especially for people like me that collect several years holiday collection from Dior. It's nice to have something different to add into your collection. I also want to mention that I used last year's sequin lipstick with today's makeup look, because for some reason Dior is taking forever to launch this year's new sequin lipsticks, which I'm really excited to review very soon. But as you can see, this is such a beautiful color. This is the iconic 999, which is one of the most beautiful red lipsticks that you can get in the market. And this lipstick has a very nice sparkly finish if you press your lips together. The downside is that this lipstick is a little bit dry, so I'm hoping that the new formula this year can fix this problem. So we'll have to see. If you want to find out if that's the case, make sure that you follow this channel so that you don't miss out. In terms of final thoughts, even though prices increased quite a lot, especially in the Canadian market for those 2 eyeshadow palettes, I still think they are a good buy, especially the small one, given that you can convert it into a card holder. Plus, I think this year's color story is quite unique compared to the previous years. So even though you have the collections from the previous years, I think you're not going to have a lot of dupes. The formula is also slightly different, and I like it how they introduced the matte colors that can create more dimension for your eye looks. So I do think the small eyeshadow palette is a pretty good buy. In terms of the big eyeshadow palette, I would say it depends on whether you have a lot of the previous year's collections. For myself, for example, I've been collecting Dior's Holiday face palette for the last 5 years, and I would say the shade range as well as the formula choices is not that different compared to the previous years. I was a little bit disappointed that the highlighter shades, the pink, the light pink, and the white didn't turn out as well as I anticipated. That's one reason that I didn't pick up the palette. The packaging is very beautiful, and when you're done with the product, you can take out the eyeshadow palette and make it into like a little vanity desk container. to me, it wasn't worth it to collect that palette, but the rest of the colors are beautiful, especially if you enjoy the lipstick shades that they provide. It could be a good buy. So so that would be my view, and I hope that this video has been helpful in terms of helping you to decide whether you're going to pick up this year's Couture eyeshadow palettes or not. And if you have any additional questions, please feel free to leave a comment down below, and I will be more than happy to answer your questions. I do have a lot of holiday related videos coming up, including a review of the rest of the Dior Couture Holiday collection, as well as Chanel holiday gift sets. So if that's something that you're interested in, please make sure that you like this video and subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss out. And I look forward to seeing you in my next video.